turning into the hackathon channel, I did not realize that this thing actually gets all the channels, not just the IETF 24 channel.
Well, you can select for which one you want it to be in.
And the side chat in the full tool gives you everything from all the channels.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
How handy.
I was in an all hands meeting when I worked for SendMail, and the old logo has a stylized logo with bits all the way around it. And the bits were supposed to be ASCII for SendMail. And I was thinking of this guy named Nick, and he's staring at it. And I'm like, what's your problem? He goes, there's a typo. I said, what are you talking about? Because that says Yeedmail. And he was right. They had done the logo wrong and all the swag, all the posters, everything like that.
Awesome. What did it say?
Yeedmail. There were two typos in the ASCII.
Excellent.
YEED. I don't know. I don't know how the bit math got wrong.
What was it supposed to be?
SendMail.
Almost the same.
Hit 2 letters wrong.
Yeah.
When Basecamp did their hey email with the inbox IM rather than IM, we our dog food server at Fastmail now replaces the second letter of inbox with a random Unicode character. Every time you log in, you get a different one.
That's excellent trolling.
All right. The gavel has fallen. The hour of 5 is upon us. Welcome to DKIM. Let's see if this is actually where. Hey! So we have a brand new Notewell slide. Hopefully some of you have seen this. I have my feelings about it, but we'll discuss those at the plenary. But please do have a read over this. There is actually a QR code there so that you can find the link and go read all the bits with links and such for yourself. It describes the fact that by participating in the IETF, you agree to follow policies. This includes professional behavior, all of the contribution requirements. Please take a moment to take a look if you've not seen this before, and excuse yourself if you need to. A good scan. Okay. So, for folks in the room, please do make sure to sign in to the data tracker and into this particular session. We're going to use the queue in the on-site tool. So if you want to speak at the mic, push the little queue, the raise your hand button, and that will allow us to keep track of everybody in the room and outside of the room. And please make sure your audio is off on your laptop. Otherwise, it makes for very exciting sounds in the room. For folks who are remote, please make sure your audio and video are off unless you're up to the mic and speaking. Then we would love to see your smiling face. And headset helps a lot as far as feedback goes. So if you've got one, please use one. I think that's all there is to say on that. Here are links. If you want to go take a look on our working group page, you will find a bunch of these as well, and you can go ahead and follow along with everything we're doing. So, administrivia. So John Levine has volunteered to write down little action items in the note taker tool. Please feel free to join him. The chat relay, I'm going to be, and Murray, I assume, will be trying to follow the chat online, but please do give us a second. And if you really need to make a comment, go ahead and raise your hand. We did the note well, and now let's talk about the agenda. So right now, the way we've got this set up is what we're doing now, administrivia. We had some folks at the hackathon this week who actually did some hacking. I was very thrilled to hear them yammering about it just as we entered the room and still complaining about whose code was at fault. It's probably Bron's. So we're going to get a little report on that. Bron, Alan, whoever else is around who wants to talk about what we did during the hackathon, please contribute. Bron's got a few slides, and but we'll leave it pretty open-ended. Then there was a meeting that happened among a bunch of folks, Bron, Dave, a few other people in Philadelphia a few weeks back, where they sort of got through some issues, sorted some. There were still some controversies, still some open things, but some got sorted rather nicely. So Bron's going to let us know what's going on there. And again, anybody else in the room, Dave sent us a message that he probably was not going to be able to join us remotely for the meeting. But oh, he is on the chat. Excellent. Okay, well, I didn't notice that. Good. Well, hopefully he can join into the discussion. If you're able to, Dave, please do join in at the appropriate time. Then there's a couple of documents that are now adopted, and one that is not, that Bron is going to chat about a bit. And then the chairs will have some things to say about it. And then we've got some time for any other business. Any comments, questions about the agenda, things we've missed? Seeing none, we will leave it as it is. Thank you. Before we get to the hackathon report, Murray, the chairs have been yammering, and Murray has the next item.
Yes. We're aware that this work came to us from a group of like-minded operators and implementers, but some of the meetings among that group still take place outside of the context of this working group. We would like to encourage those groups to start having those meetings with us, and if it means us hosting interims, we're happy to do that. So I guess we'd like to make that suggestion. So the decisions aren't being made in two places or even partly made in two places. So I'd love to hear about how soon do they want to do this? What sort of agendas would make sense? What do you want to see us tackling faster than we have been that necessitates these other meetings? Please reach out to us.
Anyone want to comment on that in the room, or we can certainly talk about it on the list? But you know, Murray and I are willing to spend some time. Alan, if you want to come up.
Alan Robinson. I'm one of the aforementioned group of people. I'm fully supportive of us setting up some regular interim meetings between these in-person ones.
How frequently are you thinking? I mean, we're willing to spend the time chairing these. What kind of length, what kind of frequency are you thinking about?
Not weekly, either monthly or every 2 weeks would be fine. Hour to hour and a half. They're frequent enough, like we don't need huge blocks of time each time. Hopefully we can move small bits of the conversation forward.
So 90 minutes monthly, is there anybody who thinks that's ridiculous, wouldn't be able to make it, is too much, is too little?
Ron, you want to jump in?
Shrug from John Levine for the record.
Yeah, I agree. Dave said discussion's supposed to happen on the mailing list, which is fine. It still will. I'm just reading straight out of the chat there.
Mhm.
I think monthly 90 minutes works for
Good.
me. It's where you can discuss things backwards and forwards faster. It doesn't mean the decisions are made there,
Right.
but
Okay.
it would substitute for waiting 4 months each time. I like it. Thanks.
It makes at these meetings we can actually make working group business decisions too. So, or well, at least they have to be verified on the list, but it saves you an extra step. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So we'll get discussion started on the list about when to schedule those. You know, and lots of working groups do this kind of thing where get a bunch of interims going so that work makes good progress and we have something to actually talk about on the list and get some conclusions done. So, all right. With that said, let's go on to hackathon. So, Bron, do you want to talk to, and we can project your slides, issues discovered, issues resolved, implementations that have been going on, all the plans, etc.
Sure.
Have a clicker.
Thank
Let me
you.
get the right slides up here. Oh, I have to unshare first, don't
I
I?
figure I might as well make this a comfortable height for me since I'm likely to spend a bunch of time in front of it.
How do we unshare the current slides?
And there's
Close the working group.
there's no camera for me. That's okay.
I think you have to take it back from the slide clicker first.
Oh, take it back
Aw,
from
man.
the slide clicker first. There we go. Okay. Share slides, hackathon, confirm, clicker, anoint. Yes.
Ta-da. Does it work? Yes, it does. All right. Experience gained. Specifications were woefully incomplete to actually implement. We renamed modification Allegra to male version. The draft is somewhere in data tracker purgatory waiting for the chairs to approve the name change because
All right, just
it was thank you. Because it's a candidate for adoption, they had to approve me changing the name of the draft, so it's still stuck, and there's not a published version that has the changes, but they are in the interop repo, so you can see the source code there. Replace the D equals. The original plan was that you would say I'm deleting header 1, header 2, header 3, etc., and then I'm adding these headers, and decided that it was better to use the same logic we use for the body, which is mentioning it all implicitly removes anything that's currently that and then replaces it with your recipe. And your recipe can be a list of instances to copy, which are lines from the body, or header fields counting from the bottom up with that name for the header. And it's basically the same syntax for both. We also decided that the plain text version is risky and messy, and we'll just make everything base 64 encoded. So it's just base 64 now. We left explicit lists of headers like DKIM1 in for interop. Figured we can argue that out later, but our library's already like that. So let's just use what the library's like. And decided that the DKIM2 signature only needs to actually sign the older mail version and DKIM2 signature headers, which I'll describe how that works at some point today. I can't remember if it's in this slides or the mail version ones. And we got something working and it didn't interoperate. That was the report as of yesterday. The report as of today, breaking news, was that Alan's verifier can validate all of my messages. And the breaking news as of 5 minutes before this meeting started is my validator can validate all of Alan's messages. Hey. So everything works. We're ready. Let's just ship it. In terms of the headers that are in here, implicitly signed, this was my sample case that we had, which has a couple of mail versions between some signatures and 2 different signatures that sign the same message. I didn't use 2 selectors either, probably should have. But anyway, all these cases work, and the signing order is like this. It signs the mail version and then the DKIM signature that covers it, and then any further mail versions underneath each DKIM signature that covers that one. So it's basically the reverse order that they would be, or from the bottom order that they would be in a message if you just prepended everything as you did it. But this order is explicitly like this, regardless of how things were found.
Your mail version document is showing canceled.
I did another one.
It says you canceled.
I did. I canceled it and then I resubmitted it.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
Ah,
The tracker doesn't like that.
thanks. Thanks, tracker. So yeah, the first one signs that, the next one signs that, next one signs that, and finally it signs all of that. I wrote a thing that verifies this and it validated the outputs. All this code is in the interop repo, which is public. You can go in there, you can see the horrible Perl that I wrote, and you can see an email that I sent to the mailing list, not this one, some other mailing list, months ago, but an IETF mailing list, and then the email I got back, except I messed up and I put the wrong original email in the repo, so it's actually a different source email, and the mail version changes will convert from the new email back to the old email and show where the badness happened, and show that the IETF mailing list sent on the wrong message, and is the bad actor in this case if we actually were doing that. But it all validates just fine. All the details are there. This is the details of them, and says what's in there, but you can go read the headers yourself if you want. They as lightly modified as possible to make all of this work. and it's all there. One fun thing about that is that between MM2 and MM3, I added an extra header and some extra lines and then removed them again. So you can see the header being re-added by the MV equals 4 because it got cut out again. And you can see the line being re-added because it got cut out from the message. All right. There's keys in the interop thing as well, so you can play with them. They're in the DNS, so even if your library doesn't pull from there, you can just pull them straight from DNS. So you can falsify emails, even DKIM1 emails from this domain. It has no reputation worth caring about. So the verification algorithm goes through, finds the highest DKIM2 signature, finds the mail version, undoes any mail versions above that, checks the signature, rinse, repeats, which is what gave that output that I showed before. It's going through, validating each one, then stripping it off and checking if there's anything more to validate in the message, all the way back to the start. And that is all the notes I've got from that. We worked on this, the two of us plus some other people playing around with things. It's not quite the final form of any of the documents, but at least we managed to get some things to work together. So we verified that at least that much works. And that's all I've got for the hackathon. Thanks.
Any questions? I got to sit around and listen to them go back and forth and try and figure out why one's validator wasn't working on the other's message. It's quite fun.
I was forgetting to put end lines on. We did all sorts of fun things. I thought my library was adding the headers, but it wasn't. It's hilarious.
Code, man. Cool
I
stuff.
spent so much time. Yeah.
No comments, no questions? Richard, go ahead.
Yes, I also had a little play on on Saturday and Sunday, except I wasn't party to them messing around with all of this stuff. So I actually implemented the DKIM2 spec, which I had for straightforward DKIM2 signatures, which includes all of the stuff in my spec. I'm here to tell you that basically in what was essentially one Monday, I was able to implement the whole thing from scratch and make it work. I have one or two observations about what actually took the time, which was more to do with wrapping things in order to produce header fields or part header fields of a sensible length. And also I picked up one or two bugs in my spec as I was doing that and so forth. I look forward to understanding the new scheme and seeing where some of the fields which Bron isn't talking about, things like this was exploded and that sort of thing, and the mail receipt to, mail from, etc., are going to end up in this scheme. But in general, I'm pretty happy with the notion that the mail version stuff is not repeated on every hop, and it only gets added in when people actually change things.
Nice. Trent.
Yeah, so apologies for being remote. But as we look at the success, Bron, of your failed experiment, and which learned lots of stuff. The question is, what's the best way we can feed the results from the hackathon into the broader community? I mean, is there going to be a formal write-up, or do you want to just send notes to the list? How should we, feed that back out to the group?
I'll just send a link to the meeting materials from this session, I think, pretty much. So a link to these slides and a link to the repo and a quick write-up that says, read the slides.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the transcript from the session.
Yeah. Exactly. The AI generated transcript of the lovely stuff we said.
Has all the bugs fixed in it.
Yeah. And new ones added. All right. I'll go sit down for a second, have a click.
Well, you can stay up here if you want.
I'll stay up here then.
So we have to first do the clicker.
We've got a Richard back in the queue.
Oh, go ahead, Richard, while we're getting.
Yeah,
things-
well, while you're messing around, what I didn't say is what I actually implemented was essentially a submission server. And it actually speaks SMTP and so forth. It's sitting in the repository. So if you want to, if you're fed up with XIM and you want to send mail with DKIM1 and DKIM2 headers, then there's a nice piece of Perl there which will work just fine. And I was actually using it to send the mails which I was created off to a Yahoo server, which was perfectly happy to accept them.
I don't know if we should do the mail version slides first. It might be worth flicking through them quickly, just because there's not, I think, much to discuss there. And this one references them. Thank you.
Glad to.
All right. Mail version, the draft that may or may not be available online for you to look at soon. It was basically the first thing we decided, sorry about the small text, was to decouple the mail version from DKIM2 signature, both in terms of decoupling the indexes for them, that mail version has its own counter that's independent of the signature, so you can add a new version without signing, and you can sign without adding a new version. And also there's no reference to DKIM2 signature at all in here. You can use mail version without DKIM2 signature. You could, in theory, add mail versions to an email that was signed with DKIM, and you'd be able to undo and check what had changed and what the DKIM signature was with none of the other properties of DKIM2. I've also included hashes of the content. So each MIME part has its own hash of the binary, defined in terms of IMAP part numbers. So I have some examples later, and it will show the IMAP part content transfer encoding removed SHA-256 hex of, or SHA-256 base 64 of that content. And so that allows you to then see whether a particular part is the same as a part that was in a previous email without, even if the lines have been re-encoded and line lengths have been changed or whatever in the base 64. Apart from that, it has DKIM2 style body and header hashes. So the body hash is the text of the body lines using relaxed the same way that DKIM does. And the header hash is, again, there's an H equals list that lists the headers that have been hashed in order. And it's precisely that. There's no additional hashing of this header itself. It just references the hashes of the various parts. And the idea is that DKIM2 then signs that, and that gives you your Merkle tree consistency check, integrity check of everything from there. It has algorithmic dexterity. It lists that it's using SHA-256, or you can use something else if you want to hash with something else instead. The language, as I described in the previous slides, base 64 only. There's no clear text for individual lines. Any mention is replacement. So it implicitly deletes the thing you mentioned, which is either body or header fields with a specific name. And everything is the range-based copy, either a field, body, or a line. That's something that's slightly different than the way we calculate the signatures. We don't include the CRLF. I looked at the syntax in the RFCs that describe email, and the header is the field name, colon, field body, CRLF. And field body is allowed to have CRLFs only when they're used for wrapping, or folding as they called it. So I'm using those definitions, which are not really well ABNF'd, but are pretty well described. Header fields are BC. Christ was born on the empty line. Everything before that's in reverse. So we count header fields up from, and everything indexes from 1 because 0 is false in too many programming languages. All right. I drew a nice little pretty picture of that foo goes 1, 2, 3 up, bar starts at 1, and the lines count down. The syntax h.field-name equals header recipe. Now the field name is a little bit interesting here. What's legal in header fields is a bit more than it should be. And we've talked a bit during the hackathon about whether we should try and lock that down a little bit tighter than what's allowed there. The email core BIS documents don't tighten that down as much as they should, but it is expert review required. So we could tell the experts not to allow anything that includes weird characters that will make our life miserable. The recipe is just these things. It's a base 64 encoded line or a range to copy from inclusive, or we destroyed some data here. We're not telling you what it was. You won't be able to recover. That's supported in both. And case the field name should be retained. So you put the field name in the case that you want it to appear in the message, and it will put that on all the copies it puts back, in theory. So here's a nice little example. It has h.foo equals copy 1 to 2. And so 1 to 2 get copied into the resulting message. And the third line is not copied because it was not mentioned. Body replacement, B equals body recipe. And it's the same thing. There's individual lines which you specify out, or there's a range to copy. And there's nothing to stop you copying in different order than the order they are in the email. But I think generally people will just be doing a diff and then applying that. And again, you can say I destroyed things. The expression B colon by itself means an empty line. There's no base 64 value, which comes out as an empty string. And because, again, this does not include the CRLF, it is the line without its line terminator. And again, the syntax in the documents in RFC 5322 is a little bit woolly on this. It just calls it 998 text as the definition for the thing that appears before and after CRLFs, but it's one of those. All right. Again, here's an example where replaced line gets replaced with line 3. That is the base 64 encoding of line space 3. And so it copies 1 through 2, inserts that line, copies 4 to 4, which is just a single line. Theoretically, we could allow the syntax to not do something dash itself and just say a single item is itself. That's a bike shed I don't really care too much about. We're generating these things with computers. Here's a real mail version header from my test cases. And so you can see it has the number, it has the algorithm that was in use, it has the list of all the headers, and I'm using DKIM1 style, so it mentions it n times there, but my validator will confirm that there are exactly that many there. If there's another instance of a named header that wasn't hashed, it will say that's an error. It shouldn't, nothing should be added. So rather than oversigning, I'm just saying it must match exactly the number that are there. It has that extra dash header that I added and then removed. And then it has the hashes, and they are all some nice little bits of base 64, which you can see part hash 1.1, 1.2, and 2. This message has the 2 MIME parts that were 1 and 2 in the original email that I sent to Mailman, which then wrapped that in a multi-part with a signature at the end. So part 2 is the signature that I added. Also, there's a authentication results. You can see there's 5 of them signed here. The message that was the previous one only had 1 of those. So 4 of them got added. They will be stripped off. And also there's a receive-SPF header that got added and is signed by this particular algorithm because it was on my list of headers to sign, and that gets stripped off to create the previous email. So, and that's what it says. Lines must not contain CRLF. Here's the definitions that are present in the documents. And so in mail version, I say you can't tack multiple lines together in a single base 64 expression that spits out more than 1 line. I can see how a program would work just fine with that, but it looks like a way to smuggle weirdness in. So each line is a line by itself, comma separated with a B colon at the front. Is this language expressive, powerful enough? Too much? Should we add headers for hashes for the headers of the MIME parts and the non-decoded versions as well? Is the name mail-version okay? It's kind of similar to MIME-version, but it means something very different. Will that confuse people? And obviously we need to actually create ABNF for all the things in here, including the things that are a bit woolly in the documents we're referencing. This is my last slide.
So Dave had one he wanted me to relay, and particularly since I agree with it. Expert required is a pretty high bar. It makes sense for things that can kill a system, but this isn't it.
By expert required, I mean that the email headers IANA registry that already exists has expert required assets.
Does it really?
Yes, and that is the thing that defines the kind of shit that we would expect to see after the dot in this
Mumble.
And so the thing that goes there is very likely to be in an expert required registry, and those experts should know not to allow you to put random stuff in there that is going to make everyone sad.
So you can't do this for anything that's in the provisional registry, which is first come, first serve?
I mean, you can do it with anything, but we can say you can't mail version a message. You can't change a header with mail version or sign a header with mail version that.
Provisional is also expert review.
There you go.
Well, so and Dave's expression of the green pukey face in the chat represents my face too. But there you go.
Yep.
The other, with regard to your third question, the chat room seems very excited that mail version not be the name.
Okay.
Message diff with message spelt as MSG diff seems to be the local favorite, but you know, the bike shed has not been fully painted yet.
There are two things in this same header, one of which is an expression for how to get back to a previous version of the message, and the other of which is a bunch of digests about the current message, not the previous message, because the previous header will have that in. I bike shedded a few other things like mail instance or there's a bunch of stuff in the chat history that I don't remember.
And the chat is continuing to contribute as you speak.
Excellent.
So we'll take that offline. Richard,
this
you were in
queue.
the queue.
Yes, I was going to say that it sounds as if it's inherent in this that you have to put in a mail version when you first make an email, right at the very beginning.
You must put one in the first time you sign it. Yes.
Right. Okay. Yes. So that means that yes. So when a message is made, assuming it's going to go anywhere near DKIM2, then you have to put one of these in. Therefore, saying it was a difference, it's not a difference from anything. It says there are no differences. It has a pile of hashes in it. That's the first thing.
Dash manifest.
and there were a couple of suggestions. They like message better than mail because mail dash sounds like yeah. But message dash version, message dash revision, MSG dash revision. As I said, I think we can probably solve this in a forum that is not this one.
Okay. The other thing to say is that I don't see where the 998 came from. In the real world, the world is full of messages which have very long lines in them indeed, and everything copes just fine with those. So saying that you can't sign one of these or produce one of these is not going to be particular popular anywhere. Yes, it'd be a good idea if messages stayed within length. Yes, it's a really good idea for many systems if you keep it under 64K, because otherwise things break. But 998 is kind of an aspiration in the real world. Finally, I am yet to be convinced by anybody who wants to sign particular parts of a message. I understand that various people are interested in this in order to save bandwidth on mobile phones or something, but that is not something that deeply concerns me most days.
I wanted to answer the 998 thing because it is the ABNF in 5322 is the only ABNF that describes lines in an email, and so it was more that it is the lines in an email are very poorly defined. There's not a good piece of ABNF that I can reference here to say what that base 64 encoded value is.
I can give you the small history of why that showed up is, and it is ancient history. There was a time where everyone was convinced that all implementations we knew about could handle 1,000 length lines. They had buffers to do that, and some they knew of did not. I expect that is a vestige of an old time, but that's why that's in there. The full ABNF, if you count the what you need to accept, I do not believe says 998. I think it says however much text there is. It's the if you're producing email messages, you should produce them with less than 1,000 character lines.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth. Jim, you're up to bat.
Hi, Jim Fenton. Couple comments. Earlier on, you mentioned something about algorithmic agility, like being able to use different hash algorithms. I'm very dubious of that claim, just because of the problem of senders not knowing which algorithms the verifiers are using, and so I think we have to tread lightly there. So that's one comment. The other. And you know, I don't usually like to comment on drafts I haven't read, but I guess I have an excuse here.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow,
Among our excuses.
this is, you know, not into the details of how the of how this mechanism works, but thinking back to a very long time ago when we were doing DKIM and discussing the much maligned L equals tag there, one of the concerns that was frequently expressed was the question of how does a verifier know that if there's a modification that it isn't malicious? And you know, you've got a lot more stuff here, and it's great, but I think operationally, we're still faced with the question of, okay, great, we know the message was modified. How do we know that the message that we want to accept the modification? And I think that's fundamentally a very hard problem here.
I've got a 2-letter answer for you. It begins with A and it ends with I.
I remain dubious.
But more specifically, generally what I expect to happen is that the message goes into whatever classifier decides it was good or bad. And if it's good, everything's happy. And if it's bad, then the system tries to figure out who's responsible for the badness. And what this does is each hop that signs it is accountable for what it saw when it put its signature on, and not for anything that happened afterwards. So you can tell, you can rewind, check each one, go, does this look bad? Does this look bad? Does this look bad? Well, they all look bad. So it's the source, or it got bad around here. So let's turn our Sauron's eye to this guy and check out whether this particular signer is signing a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, how to express that to typical email users remains a problem, I think. But
Paste the copy into your vendor's site and see what they tell you.
Pete speaking from the floor. So to the comment that Richard made about parts, and Alan and Bron and I just happened to go to lunch together and had a lovely discussion about this. I see the potential, especially for some of these services that will remove attachments, do part level kinds of changes to documents, that this might plausibly be useful. So I at least, it was sensible to me to think of these things. It might end up out in the wash in the end anyway, but it was at least an interesting mechanism.
Also from the queue, but too lazy to go over there. Some point in a recent meeting, I think, Andy, we talked a little bit about the thing Jim brought up about algorithm agility, and decided that we were going to try to punt that from these discussions. Is that still true? Because maybe that was about crypto and not hashing. I can't remember, but I remember this came up before and we decided not in scope.
Was this the thing I had to talk to the Sec ADs about?
Yes, I think.
And
so.
I think they said don't.
They
It's
said
not an
don't.
issue. Yeah.
Not an issue.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I would be really happy to punt it. I think explicitly listing the algorithm that you're using to calculate the hashes has value, even if we have a default that it is if you don't specify it, because that allows us to change things later. But maybe we just say, if you change the hash, you change the header. I don't know. But I'm pretty happy with just having the hash name in there, which looks like that algorithm that it was used to calculate this was SHA-256.
DKG, you're up.
On the algorithm agility question, I think I would be fine with just revising the header so the header is named something different if the baseline algorithm changes. I actually think that too wide agility here is harmful. I don't think we know how to do that well.
Okay, my only question with that is if we then make DKIM2 dependent on male version headers, we would have to revise the whole stack if we added things to the list of ways in which things can be hashed.
Sure. So part of the problem with that is that then there's a question of if you have two of these headers that are in sort of different tracks, then it's sort of like what Git is going through right now with the SHA-256 flavor of Git and the SHA-1 flavor of Git, and do they have to refer to each other or not? And that's kind of a mess, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know. I'm happy that at least your agility that you're putting in here is only one. It's not like you're allowing different hashes for different subsets, which would be completely bananas. Yeah. So thank you for that. I wanted to comment also on this idea that we're looking at, where did the message go bad? This is based on the idea that we are classifying messages as like spam or ham. Yeah.
Not necessarily. It's more, where did this particular change happen? And so the only thing that each signer is saying is, these are the bytes that were present when I saw this message. And so the validation can do whatever it likes with that. It can look at it and say, this added a footer that contains content that I find objectionable. So anything that adds that footer is a problem. But you know which site added that footer.
Right, and we're just being sort of completely agnostic and allowing arbitrary changes to arbitrary parts of the message.
Yes.
Right, and that part is the part that makes me. I mean, there are going to be ways to use this that do things like negate the semantics of the message.
Yes.
Like, I agree to this contract becomes I disagree with this contract, and I don't see how you can, like, the spam ham division doesn't make any sense there, and I don't know, from a user perspective, I don't know how that's useful. But if we just say, well, we're putting this in place because we have the spam ham division, and yes, it turns out it could be used to annotate a semantic reversal of the message content, but we don't have any clear way how to use that, then I'm fine. If there's a theory that this is going to be used to deal with that kind of message tampering, then there's a much bigger stack that needs to be involving user experience.
Yeah. The only reason to make this as general as it is that once this is defined, you can't change it very easily. It's the same as changing any hash algorithm. Once you've written this mechanism and baked it into how DKIM2 checks who did what, anything that it can't do can't be done without rewriting the whole stack. And so that's why it is this general. I think that that's a good thing in this case, because you can create any email you like anyway. You can take any email that's been sent that you've got a copy of, slice whatever lines off you like, change whatever you like, and inject it into someone else's system with your own DKIM signature on it right now, and the other ones just won't validate. The difference here is that you can see what to change from that to get back to the previous message that you had.
Just a small chair interrupt before you, John.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a great deal of interest in this document, which sounds like the chairs will be putting out a call for adoption. But let us remember that this document is not yet adopted. And so if you want to jump in the queue, please do so now, because I'd like to conclude this discussion in the next a few minutes so that we can go on to things that are already adopted by the working group.
So to pop my way back up the stack, yes, we should adopt it. Apropos of what Dan was talking about, I think we have a chain of signatures that's going to have a chain of signers, and my assumption is that you will most likely apply the worst reputation of any of the signers. You know, so if it goes through a bad guy, then you attribute it to the bad guy. You know, and I'm with you that, like, I do not understand any way we can say these are nice changes that are allowed and those are not nice changes that are not allowed. Speaking of changes that are not allowed, apropos of the body part header, I think we need, if we want to go whole hog and make the male version algebra smart enough to say insert this part here and delete that part there, then I think it's worth having the body part hashes. Otherwise, I don't think they're worth anything.
That seems reasonable. Certainly, if you don't put a z equals in there somewhere, then their body part hashes are valuable when you do the z equals to delete some parts, and you can say these other parts didn't change.
So on the algorithmic dexterity stuff, I mean, we haven't currently been tossing around replacing the hash one at all, but something similar to Richard's draft for DKIM 2, where it maintains a separate hash and signature for each algorithm that is declared, would work here equally well, right? You could say like A1 is SHA-256 and A2 is fancy post-quantum-y thing. And then you'd have HH and BH and all the PHs would all be duplicated once for the SHA-256 one, and then another set for your second algorithm.
Sure. Space is cheap anyway. Yeah, and it gets cheaper over time. That works for me. And we could do it without extending this at all. You could extend it in a way that added a new algorithm key and new keys calculated with it to this without breaking backwards compatibility at all.
Go ahead, Richard.
Let's be clear, SHA-256 is an excellent hash algorithm. Nothing is known against it. It may well survive into the quantum era if that ever turns up just fine. But I think we should plan for the possibility we have to replace it. As Alan just said, signing with two hash algorithms is very straightforward. And the reason for doing that and not going to a new header is because it allows us to interoperate. Because the likelihood is that if somebody can forge a SHA-256 hash, then there are going to be a nation state or some other somebody else with a great deal of computing power, and therefore from day to day most people probably won't care about it, and therefore there will not be a great rush of everybody to drop everything and change to a new hash algorithm tomorrow morning. As a result of which, in order to be able to continue to operate, we need to be able to continue to accept the old hash algorithm alongside of the new one if it is there, and people who want to send mail and have it accepted everywhere are going to sign it with both algorithms hash it with both algorithms, because in one case they're sending to people who don't care and think nation states are a fiction, and in other cases they're going to be sending it to people who are very concerned and will only accept the new hash algorithm. So doing it that way and planning to do it that way and doing the syntax appropriately is almost free from the point of view of designing it, and gives us a great deal of flexibility down the road if we ever need it.
Sounds good. I will add in the capability that if there is an A2 equals, then there's a HH2, a BH2, a PH2, etc., and so on. And then you can even put SHA-1 in there as well, which already gives you lots of safety, because if someone can break both SHA-256 and SHA-1 on the same message to produce the same output, they're doing pretty well.
All right. So let me undo that and let's talk about the header document, I believe.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to probably
on a
go
sec.
through these slides first. I'm actually going to grab a quick drink of water and then come back and do this. I'll go through and show you what all the slides are and then come back and discuss the individual points, just so we know what the context is.
Here. Oh, you have a bottle.
Pour it into
By the way,
your laptop or whatever.
your document was released. It was behind a bug in the data tracker.
Oh, good. My favorite. All right, here we go. So, lots of open questions on this one. I'm sure you've all read the draft. This one was uploaded today, so you've had plenty of time. But the previous revision was uploaded at like 10 minutes after midnight today, so you've definitely had time. The open questions, I think these are the main open questions. Do we have a single recipient per message or multiple? How do we link recipients in next domain? How do we detect the next hop supporting DKIM2, which includes SNTP extensions, includes the one signature per recipient stuff, maybe some DNS. And finally, do we sign all the headers or an explicit list, and some questions about over-signing, requiring all copies with a name or having it copy of name by number of header fields. That's a Unicode multiplication symbol, by the way. All right. So I have problem statement about the single multiple recipients and some options. Same for the linkage between domains. We'll come back to all this. Same for detecting DKIM2 support in the next hop and the whole rest of the path, which is really impossible. Whether we should sign all the headers, the nit around timestamp, whether it should be, we could bike shed this one for the whole time, whether it should be a Unix timestamp or an RFC 339 timestamp or one of the really bad ones in early email standards. Discussion topic around the flags. This particular list is what's currently in the document, whether that is too much, not enough, the wrong things, whether this should be there at all. There's the topic of multiple algorithms. And then there's the fact that we have DKIM2 header and DKIM2 spec, which say almost but not entirely incompatible things. And that we have to decide what we're going to do, whether we put it all in one document, whether we make one how this works and the other one how to use it or something else. That is the full set of my slides. So
we'll do questions as they come up per slide.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
So starting with the single or multiple recipients per email question. Some sites, particularly Microsoft, want to be able to send that same message to multiple recipients. I figure these are the four main options. We could ignore them asking for this and just say, no, one signature, one email, one recipient. It'll be bad for adoption. It means you have to pay the signing cost for every single copy, even if you have multiple recipients, and it means extra bandwidth use because you're sending the full message multiple times via SNTP, even if it's all going to the same system with recipients who are all listed in the to and CC and all know about each other anyway. Second option, which does have some privacy concerns, is including all the recipients in a single DKIM2 signature. This is the RT equals A, B, C, which is what we have now. As in, that's what's in the current version of the document. The privacy concern there is that you can see who all the other recipients are, particularly if there's a BCC'd person, that could give things away. Spoiler alert for later in the I exploded this flags, that also gives away information that it may have gone to more than one person when you thought it was a personal email for you, but your operator set up a silent alias to take a copy of everything for whatever reason. Do we include multiple DKIM2 signatures? So this is option one, but put them all in a single message and either expect the next hop to strip out all but the one that was for this particular recipient or not. And that leads into the, do you have DKIM2 detection so you know that the next hop will do that? Because if you send this to a naive site that doesn't know about the DKIM2 header, it's not going to do any stripping for you. And then finally, there's the send the signatures via SNTP and have the next system add them to the message when it handles each message, which for sure will guarantee that you won't get multiple of them appear in a message, but it means a lot of extensions to SNTP and to that whole thing. And this was the proposal from the mailing list. And I see we have someone in the queue already.
Go ahead. Latimer, I believe, is who is up. So you have to turn on your mic and or your video. Well, turn on your mic at least, and maybe your video.
Sorry. I don't have video, unfortunately. Regarding the passing the signature through the SMTP session, I believe that might be responding to a comment that I made recently on the mailing list. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding there about what I was proposing. I wasn't actually referring to passing the signature through the SMTP session at all, but a derived hash just of the individual recipient's signature. So when the email is initially signed at the first step, the a hash would be derived from the signature using the same selector, and the email address itself, and the first part of the signature with the eventual hash value in, just as existing signatures are done. And by doing that, that can be passed through the session from beginning to end and only written into the email at a terminal point. So, for example, forwarding, explosion onto a mailing list, delivery, or a bounce message. So there'd never be an instance where you would have to recalculate that figure unless you were forwarding the message or forwarding onto a mailing list. Does that clarify where I was coming from with that?
Yes, but I don't think this works. And I don't think it adds any value because at the moment, when you're putting a DKIM2 signature with a specific destination, that gets you the same property, except you're writing it yourself rather than the final system's writing it. All the intermediate sites, unless you're saying that this is a cryptographically derived hash, which means that these systems can't see who the recipient is, or
so the
someone
intermediary
later
systems would see exactly the same information as they would if they were passing a BCC message through the system. SMTP itself would separate all those messages out so that other systems that were not going to be privileged to seeing that BCC would never see it. So yes, it would be a cryptographically derived value, but it would be derived from the original signature, which links it back to the original message, including the message ID and the message content, the email address itself, and the first part of the signature, which would include the selector information to enable the verifying system to work out which selector, which I value, and therefore the domain to query to get the key, which would probably, or would be the same key actually that was used to sign the email, and do the verification that way.
Yeah. My big problem with this is that suppose that the email went from system A to system B to system C, right?
Yep.
So system A sent this message to system B, which then sent it on to me. And suppose I was the bad guy who wanted to pretend that system A sent it to me instead. I could do that because there's no evidence in the email that system B was the intended recipient for that intermediate copy. And that allows me to take a message that's been forwarded through someone reputable and pretend that the original sender sent it somewhere completely different. So it breaks that stated next destination property that I want from DKIM2 and that I think
right. So that's actually a separate matter. So there's the two parts, which is assigning the receipt to, and separately signing the next domain. And I've come up with an idea which I think actually greatly simplifies the process. You've got it described as being complex, but it allows you to make a delayed decision on when, or delayed decision during delivery, who you're delivering it to. You can then write explicitly into that email at that point, and also into the SMTP session at that point, and my bad, it would be in the email itself, where you have explicitly said that's going to next. So you would always have that link through the next domain, and you would always have a completely separate signature verifying the recipient. I do have.
Yeah, I think at this point, what I'd be interested in seeing is an implementation of this.
Yeah, I've got a few slides that I can show you of roughly how I see it working, if that would be beneficial. Otherwise, we can discuss it off the list.
I guess I'll defer to the chairs about where it's best to do that. I'd be interested in seeing it for sure.
I guess my reaction would be, if you can scribble together a quick internet draft describing this and sending that sending that to the list. And so long as somewhere in the name of the draft it's got DKIM or DKIM2, that'll end up in our alternate, our drafts list. That'd probably be more productive at this point to give us something to sit down and give a read over first.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Cool. And by the way, just for a convenience sake, is Latimer your preferred way to address you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, will do. Okay, so yeah, if Latimer is willing to drop a draft to the list, that'd be great. And yeah, I'd be interested to see if we can pull this off, because that would be cool.
My original design of this had something like that allowed you to defer changes to the edge of the DKIM2 ecosystem, and it seemed brilliant to me and incredibly hard to get all the systems that needed to be involved in this, that from different vendors in people's tech stacks to work together nicely, which is why I've kept things purely at the email content level.
Right. So I won't take up too much more of your time, but I would just like to say that I have looked into various filter implementations, including looking into the current Milter version 8 spec over the weekend. And it actually looks like pretty much everything you would need is already in place to be able to do it with a single signature and individually signing the receipt to, with just a little stub added during the delivery phase to sign the next domain. So
Cool.
I'll go ahead and write that up.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Elliot, you're up next.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'd also be interested in seeing the presentation. I'm a little concerned about the complexity, and if I understand correctly, you're basically making a change to the SMTP transaction, and the moment you start changing the way the architectures are, I understand that you've looked at the Milter implementation or the Milter specification. My concern is when right now it's a very simple filter mechanism. It goes in, it goes out, right? And SendMail and Postfix can all do what they're going to do with it. Just for us little guys, the big guys can do whatever they're going to do. They have full control of their implementations. My high level point is that we should not put the mechanism of DKIM2 out of reach for the little guys if the complexity of the implementation is too great, right? So there should be a very, very high bar for monkeying with SMTP in terms of making sure that all of that it's not hard to do with a rev of, say, if you're revving open DKIM or what have you, in order to do this, it really has to work with those implementations.
Yes, being one of the little guys myself, I absolutely agree with that. And my idea keeps DKIM2 as a very simple linear process, almost identical to the way DKIM1 currently works.
All right. If we're going to put option 4 here, monkeying with SMTP aside, I would still be interested in some discussion of the other 3 possibilities. Richard.
Yes. When you're doing your draft, Mr. Latimer, can I strongly recommend that you pay attention to the replay prevention aim that we have in DKIM2, because we spent quite a long time outside the working group, I'm sorry about that, talking about various schemes involving hashing and so forth. And we were unable to find any of them which actually worked and provided a simple way in which you could detect replays. Replay detection, which works well, basically looks for uniqueness of the original signature or perhaps some intermediate signature, but usually the original one, which is what you care about, and then a chain which shows how it got to you. And if nobody is admitting to replaying it, then if you see more than one copy, then basically it's a replay. And we care about replays because the bad guys use them at significant scale every single day. And if you try and remove the recipient, the local part, just use the domain, that works just fine with vanity.com, but it doesn't work at all with yahoo.com, gmail.com, outlook.com, and so forth, because there are hundreds of millions of things there. And I also recommend that you look at the points being made by Dave and others on the in the chat, that exactly how BCC actually works in most systems in practice, and also the fact that hashing doesn't actually save you if all you're trying to do is to detect that one particular person, like your boss, is being BCC'd on this, because you can tell that because you're not actually searching all possible hashes. You're just searching a small list of things to see what happened. Going back to Bron's point, which he wants to talk about the rest of the slide, I'm a big favor of. I'm very much in favor of 2. I think 3 is complicated, and you rely on the person downstream to do your work for you. And I'm not terribly concerned about the cost, because in practice it's really easy to calculate almost all of the hash and then add in the very last line right at the very end, and then you don't have to repeat the whole of the rest of the hash and all the work there at all. So that's in fact fairly cheap to do that, but you do rely on somebody else to do your work for you, and people seem to be under the impression that nobody knows who an email was sent to, whereas looking at received lines is often informative, often much more informative than you might expect it to be.
So one more question that came up for me on this that we haven't looked at yet is whether the addresses should be base 64 encoded or not. And that comes down to, do you think that they're going to contain stuff that might otherwise damage your tag value parser? So I want to answer that question as well today if we can. But Graham.
Graham Orndorff. Your words up here that number 1 is bad for adoption, and then number 4 is complex. To me, complex means worse for adoption, from my point of view. The other options, I like number 1 the best, but the other options in my mind are still far preferable than trying to go down the path of changing the SMTP way that's going to work, whatever that's worth.
Alan.
Alan Robinson again. I guess I'll voice my opinion that 1 would be ideal. But if we have ecosystem players that are going to refuse to play under that scenario, really the only option I see here is 2, with a giant warning sign that says, this is in the message. Please consider very carefully what that means. Probably don't use that for BCC, mailing lists, etc.
I already have a security considerations that says that. The thing about 2 as well is that as a sender, you don't need to implement it. You can always split into individual messages, but as a receiver, if we specify it, you will absolutely be required to handle it. All right.
DKG is up next.
So I'm apologies that I have not followed the full development of this, and so I don't feel like I fully understand the privacy concerns beyond the question of, can you tell whether BCC was done or not?
Yeah, specifically if you happen to put the BCC signature in the same signature as the to and from recipients, they will all get a copy that lists who the BCC recipient was.
Right.
Which is definitely and there's already a section in the very basic security considerations I've done so far saying about this, do not. The BCC person must get a separate copy. Likewise, mailing list recipients on a mailing list where users don't know each other's addresses must get a separate copy.
Right.
But otherwise, knowing who all the recipients were, I don't see significant privacy risks here either, but people have raised it.
Okay, but you can resolve them by splitting out separate copies for the BCC recipients, right? The undisclosed recipients, as long as they get their own individual copies.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Chairs, hopefully we can after this move on to the next item.
John is the next and last.
Yeah, I think we already. I thought we had option 2.5, which is that all of the addresses that appear in the message you can sign together, and then you separate out the BCCs, and we don't care about mailing lists because other than us weirdos who use mailman, they all customize each message anyway.
Yep. I mean, what I want to specify in the document is just it's a list of addresses, and you must, if you send one of these messages, everyone you send it to must be in that list. That's as far as I want to define strictly, and then we can put best usage practices on top of that, including thou shalt not BCC, put BCCs in with everyone else. But I wouldn't encode that into the specification for how this works. All right. Basically, because I don't want the parser to have to look at the two CC, BCC headers to check. I just wanted to look at that one place.
And just a time reminder, we're now 10 after the hour, so we still have some time left on this document, but we'll
Cool.
try and move along.
The next question is linkage between domains. We have 3-ish proposals on this. The problem is that some sites host domain for customers where they don't control the DNS. At the moment, this is okay so long as they never send. If you're sending, then you probably already should have a DKIM key. But if you're only receiving to a domain, you don't have to have DKIM at the moment. This would change with DKIM2 because you need to be able to sign bounces. Because if you can't sign bounces, you can falsify bounces. And so there needs to be a way to know which domains are allowed to send bounces. And that means that they need to be somehow the next hop, unless we separate who can sign bounces from who can sign the next hop. But I think that's a whole different path that's weird. So I say 3 rough options, one of which is don't allow sites to receive email for domains they can't sign for. And you can use the existing DNS CNAME method that a lot of big multi-domain providers already use, which is tell the customer to put some CNAMEs for some selectors for their domain to something controlled by the provider. And then the key, they have a key which can be looked up. They can change that key whenever they want. And then they can sign with that key. And then the provider systems can sign and everyone's happy. Another option was having the sending signer specify additional next domains, which I think got shot down pretty well on the mailing list and is only in here for completeness. And the third one is having the domain delegate somehow with a different mechanism than DNS CNAMEs, saying this domain can sign on my behalf in a more general way. And so in that case, there would be some kind of DNS record you look up which says this domain is allowed to be the next hop for this other domain. Comments on this one? Does anyone feel really strongly that we should go back and look at 2, or that 3 is necessary?
Go ahead, Richard.
I think we should have done PP 15 years ago. And I think that given that we are trying, or we have been trying very hard not to have people change their DNS as part of doing DKIM2, I think suggesting that there's a new DNS mechanism is unwise. It expands the scope of what we're trying to do into another area. And so, though I think it's extremely elegant and easy to understand, in practice, the existing CNAME one is well understood by the industry. If you go and to quote a friend of mine, the world is full of consultants who know how to do this, and we should leverage that and just move on.
Thank you.
Wei, you're up.
He's away.
Wei, are you there?
He's gone gray on my screen.
Well, that just means he's away from the computer, but
Yeah.
Going once, going twice.
We can always come back.
And he's gone away. Okay. So yeah, this particular topic could probably use some more chewing by others in the group if you would read over the section and see what you think.
All right, I'll move on then. Yeah. DKIM2 support detection. This, I think, from the decisions we have made on the previous slides, as far as anything's made, kind of moot. And I think option 3 is chosen by default. But yeah, the problem is that if you don't know the next hop doesn't support DKIM2, you can't rely on it to do anything at all. Hopefully you can rely on it to reject your email during the SMTP transaction or not at all. But otherwise, there's not much you're relying on from the next system. So no DNS record, no SMTP extension. It means you throw it out there and hope the ecosystem catches up. Alan.
Yeah, so, we're trying to make DNS record publication as part of DKIM2 support not be a thing because it's a difficult thing for systems with large amounts of customers. So, that one just doesn't seem like an option to me. SMTP extension has a similar problem, which is that unless the provider as a whole can provide DKIM2 support for all of their customers, they don't know at the time of SMTP extensions being offered whether or not they can do DKIM2 for this particular message. And so I think we need to design for, you can throw this out there, maybe it gets processed by the system that you're sending it to, and maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I think if I was designing an SMTP extension in a perfect world for this, the reply to the receipt to line for each recipient would include a received with DKIM2 support or not. So it would be a per recipient response. But again, I don't think it's a good path.
Yeah, that's sort of maybe could be workable, but that's a lot of complexity. Particular, and I think the path to not needing to know this up front gives us a lot of gives us some good properties as it is.
Wes Hardiker speaking as myself. You do have to remember that even if there was a DNS record or something like that, you may not be able to reliably retrieve it. So you're still in the case of not being 100% certain whether or not the upstream actually supports something. In that case, you sort of fall to 3 by default because you have no guarantee one way or the other. 2 is somewhat more reliable because you're opening the connection stream and hopefully they're not lying. But
yeah, if they lie, then all bets are off with everything, right?
Oh, Wei, you've made it back to us. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Before I had a Wi-Fi issue. Wei from Google. I think that basically. Oh, if we're going back to this,
This was
yeah,
the one that you had the question on first, so I thought I'll
yeah,
give
thank
you
you.
a reply.
Yeah, I think appreciate this. So yes, I think for this, I put out some comments out on the mailing list that it would be a good idea if we do have some sort of delegation mechanism, such as PP. I think identified a scenario which would be, this would help greatly, which is basically around the scenario where we want to support algorithmic agility, and I think there's going to be a barrier there when we ask for a lot of these domain owners to then go create keys for new algorithms, particularly, and the initial version is basically RSA, which everyone's used to. But then when we ask them to go sign for, these Edward curve keys, we're going to encounter a great deal of friction, basically, with people who don't know how to do the right things. And we've seen that, I think, in the initial testing for the work that I think John Levine did, we saw some of that out on the list when there was some initial testing. And I think that will come back again, and it'll just be much more at scale. One way of making that better, of course, is to create this delegation process until people get used to signing with the new algorithm, which would be, in this case, the Edward key. So I think having PP would greatly assist in getting over that hump. And it will help us get adoption much sooner for this DKIM2. And that's why I think we should support this option 3.
So one thing I guess to say to this as well, Wei, is that adding the PP mechanism doesn't break case one. You can still use DNSC names and sign as the domain anyway. It's not like this additional way of finding a domain that can sign for the next hop will break the existing mechanism. So it would give more flexibility at the cost of an additional DNS lookup if the domain is different. In the cases where the domain is the same, you don't even need to do this additional DNS lookup. It would only be necessary when there was a misalignment, and then you would check whether there was a record that said it's okay, this misalignment is approved of. So I buy that argument.
Right.
All right. And did you have a comment on the next slide as well, the detection?
Do you have a slide basically around DKIM1, DKIM2 interop? Is that also going to be?
No, I'm sorry, I do not.
There is an element of that relationship here between, DKIM1, DKIM2 support basically there's an issue where basically I think we will run into some sort of problem where, we go out of sort of like the DKIM2 ecosystem. Now, depending on how tight that alignment is that we were just talking about a moment ago, we can kind of detect some of this perhaps using that. And then maybe we don't need to go do this sort of capabilities lookup, which it has some expense, right? But the alternative would be to have that check. And then basically the reason why that check might matter is if we want to sort of tolerate some sort of world where we do tolerate going from DKIM2 to DKIM1. If nothing really bad happens, maybe we can go back to DKIM2. And then, so that's the one area that I think we should investigate this further, is all I'm saying, right? We should go look at, especially if we want to support that scenario, and I think we should, then we want to investigate this some more. And that's my main comment that I wanted to make.
Yeah, my theory with that is so long as the mail versions link up, you can sign and have some intermediate hops that didn't work. And you go, well, there's a broken chain here. Someone could be replaying, but the message content is attributable at the signing points.
And I think I roughly agree with that. I mean, I think, we can have different tiers of validation if the chains don't fully, are not fully there, but it looks like the signatures validate, and then, and we can discuss that further on the list.
So I think the one thing that I am hearing here is nobody particularly wants to have a DNS record or SMTP extension that you look ahead and see whether the next hop supports DKIM2. You just create the message with all the right things and you hand it on to the world and hope that it embraces it in its loving arms. All right. I don't see anyone else in the queue, so I'm going to pop onto the sign all headers question, which I expect to spend the rest of the night on until we go to the pub.
Yeah,
but I hope not.
We've got one more thing that we want to talk about.
I know there are more things, so let's not spend too long on it. But this is the big question of: do we sign all the headers? Do we list explicitly which headers are signed? The problem statement here with DKIM is that not all senders are signing all the necessary headers for security. So, or security issues can be discovered with existing headers that aren't listed as security essential in whatever registry we might be putting that in. And so you could wind up with a message that can be replayed to you by a bad actor, which you can always do with DKIM2. You can replay the same message, but with different headers that add these bad properties, or intercepted and have these added along the way. And you wouldn't be able to tell because your DKIM2 signature would still validate and your mail version would still validate, and everyone would feel like life was good, but actually this thing's been snuck in there. So one proposal is to sign all the headers except trace headers or except some list, and you might say not signing these headers as well. That's easier when you have mail version because you can remove things that have been added later to get back to that old signed version. And that's kind of what my examples do. There's a ton of headers that are being signed and being stripped off by that last mail version is a page and a half long. You can explicitly list the headers like we do in DKIM. And the question there is, do we list each header field name once and say this, all instances of this assigned, you can't have additional, or do you do a count like we do now with oversigning required to stop additional ones being tacked on the front later? Or do we have some implicitly signed set of headers defined, set in stone in this document, but requiring everything we know today to be necessary good practice, and then still have a mechanism to allow you to add more later?
Go ahead, Alan, you're first up.
And yeah, at the end, I put that comment that with mail version, we could just sign the mail version and DKIM2 signature headers in DKIM2 signature and not sign anything else, and punt the header signing entirely into mail version.
Yeah, so I guess on that, that's not really solving the problem. It just moved the problem to a different document.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of inclined to go with the thing that DKIM does. So I guess option 2A, or
so 2A,
no, sorry,
right?
2B.
2B is what
Sorry,
DKIM does.
2,
Yep.
2B there.
Yep.
You know, it reduces our implementation cost because we already have, like, we can leverage a lot of the DKIM hashing implementation. We don't have to reinvent that. You know, the cost of oversigning is pretty minimal. Defining a fixed list just doesn't really work. Even a best practices thing that says you're supposed to assign these 5 things. You create a new field that needs to be signed, and signers are going to update when they get abused, realistically. And so I think it's a real, I think it's well intentioned, but isn't going to work.
All right. And what I did in my validator was, if a header of name is mentioned at all, then the signature must cover all the copies of it that are present in that message. And so if you add another one later, you have to use mail version to remove it, to get back to the previous thing. But whether we enforce that, if we do enforce it, then you only need to mention the field name once and say all copies of this field assigned. There must be however many happen to be in this message assigned at this version. Daniel.
I want to say I much prefer option 1. Simplicity is a big advantage. And I don't want to deal with these shifts. I don't want to have to reason as a recipient about which things hadn't been signed. I don't want to, as a signer, have to make a decision about which things there are. I don't see why we wouldn't go with option 1.
The argument pretty much, and I'll mirror what Dave said when we spoke about this, because I think he made the strongest case against this, which is that there's a lot of systems out there that screw with the header space and feel like it is their place to scribble whatever they feel like in, and every single one of them would have to be updated to support mail version or whatever we're going to call it, or the systems wrapping them would have to keep the old one so that they can see what changes they needed to specify happened. And if these are headers with no meaning to anyone else, it adds a lot more work for a lot more systems to implement it. That's the counter argument. I'm not saying I agree with that argument. I'm just saying that's what the strong counter argument is. Richard.
First of all, I'd really like to refute the notion that it is simpler to use the existing code, because I've stared at the existing code and the list of headers appears in about 4 different places in the Perl package I was looking at. It's really complicated, etc. Whereas just building a hash of arrays in Perl and then iterating through them in 2 nested loops was really, really simple to implement. That took me all of 10 minutes to write that bit. There is not a huge cost here in signing everything. It is also very straightforward and simple. And I'd like to, and if all you're doing is signing a message in order to send it somewhere, then that's all you need to do. If you have a system which is adding headers and you have no idea what those headers are, then I don't think you really ought not to be operating that system if you don't know what it's doing. And it is really straightforward in the syntax if you're just adding headers, to document what those headers that you're adding are. And the things which you are likely to be adding in the real world, when we look at real systems which are adding things, they're adding things like received lines, they're adding things like DKIM1 signatures, they're adding things like ARC signatures, which we explicitly excluded from the design and said those were not to be signed because it causes too much complexity and it makes you forces you to work out what order you're signing things in, as well, apart from anything else. And then finally, almost everything that I see which has been added, people stick an X hyphen on the front because that traditionally has been the way that you avoid your header clashing with something else. It doesn't, of course, and Dave Crocker wrote a fine piece ages ago now saying X hyphen was a big mistake, but equally X hyphen is what almost everybody does. So we excluded X hyphens. All of the people who have been looking at this in detail and looking at very large systems, very large and complicated systems, are extremely happy they can build it with those restrictions.
Yeah, I would agree that it's very easy in mail version to just say strip out everything with this header name. So if you're adding a header name that you know, you can very easily add that to your mail version header to say just strip all these and you'll get back to the previous thing.
I think signing all the headers is bad idea. And I think the reason is that, okay, there is going to be all kind of weird, like one of the things that they add, but with Richard said, there's also all kind of spam processing. Somebody, oh, I did the spam processing for this email. I did this, I did that. I run it this person, and the next process will do that again. And every time we have to do this mail diff and stuff because the headers are changing, especially because they're using the same, spam assassin or something else. Some of those use X headers, some of those might not be using. And another thing is that why are we signing things that we don't know what they are for? If we really care about the header, if it's clear that we actually care about the security, it should be something that we actually know now, or we know when we send an email. Or if somebody adds that, he knows that he needs to sign that. So this means that because if in DKIM2 we are going to be adding the headers, whoever adds the header that thinks that has a security properties, if he adds in the list, and I'm proposing the number 2A, so that if you sign something, you explicitly mentions it, because that means that you actually think that that header might have some security properties. That's why you add it in the list. If it's a list that does only, doesn't have any security properties, why add it to the list? And I don't know if there's any real uses for not signing all the headers, all the same headers. So if you have multiple headers with the same, field name, why are you only signing 1 or 2 or 3 of them? Why don't sign all of them? So I think the 2A, meaning that if we mention the header, we sign all the copies of that header.
I could answer the case, which is that they get added on the top always. And so if you say, there were 3 of them when I saw it, I signed those 3. If someone adds another one with the same name on the top, I don't care about that because that wasn't one that I saw. But
yeah, but I mean, in our case, we actually going to be sign it again by the upper layer because it's doing the DKIM2 processing, which means that it's a moot point because when you actually validate that signature, it only has those 3 that you actually signed.
Yeah.
Because you have already removed the 4th one that was added later.
Yes.
So I'm gonna. Do you have any more slides after that?
Yeah, I have a few more, but
Okay.
there should be quicker, hopefully.
So let's. I'll close the queue for this slide now, and let's move along.
There's some chatter in the chats about whether we should do A or B about all instances of all header fields or explicitly list, and you can go either way, right? The sign everything is the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sign specific things that are like, well, then the list has to be specific. It has to be written down somewhere. It has to be justified. And we've seen cases where the advice is something like, you should sign the fields that change the way this is rendered. Well, now the operator needs to know what all those are, and it might change over time. And like, there's a lesser of 2 evils here. I'm not certain I know what the right answer is.
Yeah, all of these have pros and cons, unfortunately, unlike previous slides where there was a clear right answer.
I just had a question, which is there any way to gather a little bit of data on Dave's concern?
in terms of will middleware, monkey with the headers to the point where the signatures become fragile, and you implement this mechanism where really you're constantly seeing broken signatures. That's no good.
In the Perl world, they call this the dark pan. There's CPAN, which is the published set of modules that use Perl features, and you can run against this huge corpus and see whether your change will break things. But there's 10 times that much code out there in people's private repositories. There's 10 times that many email systems out there that people are doing weird shit with that we don't see. And so we could make 99% of stuff work fine with any of these options. The question is, whose case do we break?
And as an aside, this is like the only working group at the IETF in which the term Perl is used. It's impressive.
Hey,
The 3 dots.
2 of us implemented in Perl. Yeah.
This is Daniel. I just wanted to respond to the claim that, well, the problem is people might, we might have systems that add headers and we should only add them if we think they're security relevant. The problem is not whether, so first off, I think the point of this is to make a signature that will cross an administrative boundary. You may also do it within an administrative boundary if you care to reuse this mechanism, but the main point of making this an interoperable standard is for things that cross an administrative boundary. And crossing an administrative boundary means that you don't know what parameters the receiving party will think are security sensitive. You know what parameters you think are security sensitive. And so if we're going to say that it's okay to just ship across an administrative boundary a header that you don't know whether the recipient will treat as security sensitive, and you're going to decline to sign some of those headers, I think that's a recipe for there just being gaps in the system. And if the goal here is for there to not be gaps, it doesn't make sense for you to emit a message from your system containing some headers that, hey, we're just not going to sign those and we'll see what happens with them. If you don't know how they're going to be handled, which is the definition of crossing an administrative boundary, I think you have a responsibility for all the headers that you are emitting. And if you have systems within, before you release the message, some of your internal systems may add headers. If you don't know what those headers do, and you don't feel comfortable signing them, you should not be putting them on the headers when they leave your administrative domain. So I don't understand, what are we trying to protect? Systems that are adding headers that they don't know what they are?
Wes gets the last word.
Wes Hardiker. I'm quite sure that there's a lot of postmasters out there that have written and installed scripts into their systems that reorder, add, delete, alter stuff. So, if you're actually going to sign everything and expect everything to always be added at the top or the bottom, or however you do it, you're probably going to break a lot of existing systems.
I think I agree, as they say, you should say, this only matters if you have received an existing message and you're making changes to it and then you're sending it out again. And then you need to calculate the difference for the mail version. You need to calculate a way to get back to something that will pass the previous signature. If you are generating a new message, it doesn't matter what you put on there because your signer is just going to iterate the full set of headers, and that's easy. Unless you're adding stuff after the signing stage, but before you hand it over the administrative boundary. And that's the case that users will have to
suspect a lot of those systems are doing spam processing and things like that, so they are resending. But
yeah, so if they're making those changes and then sending it on, and they can always just put a mail version with body equals Z, header equals Z, trust me, bro, and that's fine. The next hop will decide whether or not to asset feels fit. All right. Timestamp knit. Anyone feel like quickly throwing a bike shed on this one? I discovered there's actually quite a lot of RFCs that reference Unix timestamps, and obviously RFC 3339 is a real thing.
I think that got updated recently, didn't
it? Yeah, but not in a way that matters to this.
No, okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
You're not stuck to that profile,
Yeah. Slightly easier with existing code to stick with option 1. Option 2 is a little more human parsable. Option 3 sucks and is only on the slide for completeness because there are some really bad formats for dates in some of the mail specs that predate sanity. Richard.
Very quickly, if you would.
Nobody reads headers. I don't see why you want to make it human readable, but it's not a real cost to do so.
All right. That's an argument in favor of one. My code, it's going to be easier in my code to write one as well.
Same.
I like two, but I don't care. Cool. All in favor of one then. Flags. We have this set: do not modify, do not explode, do not forward, exploded, and feedback. So the first three are all requests to further sites, which they can follow or not as they feel fit. But if site A in my ABC example said these things, and then site B doesn't follow what site A asked, and then sends it on to site C can say, well, you didn't do what you were asked to do, so I'm not going to listen to you. Obviously, explode's a bit of a special case here. I think I wrote some stuff to the list about this already. The danger with the whole exploded thing is, imagine a case where you have a secret BCC and you don't say exploded because it's secret, but then both those BCCs then forward to the same provider that is checking for duplicates and says that this got exploded by this site that said it didn't explode it, so they're the bad guy. Imagine the other way around, where you say exploded on everything, then this has no signal value. So you're stuck in a situation where you're making a claim that either way is going to hurt you. And whether we say, you said if you're doing a lot of exploding, like more than just a few or something. Alan.
Oh, I was gonna let you finish your thought.
No, that's my thought. Yeah.
All right. I think the arguments for the first three are systems that are suffering in the current ecosystem and are just trying to find a way to make the pain stop. I don't think those entities have a good way of understanding how much of their email would be negatively affected by that. And if we implement, or if we specify and then everybody has to go and implement this thing, and then they realize, oh yeah, that was a bad idea, we don't want to use that, and then nobody uses it, then we're going to spend a bunch of time in the next revision of this spec discussing whether it's safe to rip it all out.
Do not use do not.
Yeah. So I think we need more discussion on whether to include those feature flags or not. I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion on the list yet so far on those topics.
The last one, feedback, is somewhat different from all of this, despite being in the same slide. And that is at the moment, you get into feedback loops by signing up through some external process, which I imagine would still potentially happen. But it's an indication, yes, I care about feedback on this particular message, or please no, don't tell me about this.
Yeah, I agree. Like 4 is a status that's set by an intermediary. Totally makes sense to me. 5, agreed as well. Like that's a thing that real systems today do. They want it. So there's a very clear request for it from the ecosystem, and it's worth specifying. But the first 3, I think need some more some more discussion.
Cool, thank you.
So let's be quick with these 2 comments, and then I think what I want to do is defer your last 2 slides after we do some of the finish up any other business, if we still have time, because we're down to 15 minutes.
Cool.
I think the first 2 or 3 months would yes really bad, and I think the better one would be do not disagree with me. I think it's the same level of those are same level. You are not supposed to be sender is not supposed to say what I do with my email that is sent to me. He's sending it to me. I can do it whatever I like.
Would they be better if I put please in front of them?
No. Please do not disagree with me. Didn't I say that in the beginning? You are not allowed to disagree with me because I'm the one who is sending this thing. And that's, I think it's a bad idea. I don't know if the exploded and feedback is because I don't know what the use case is. But I think the do not forward and especially is really bad because all the emails that are coming to me are forwarded.
All right, Richard, you get the last word.
Okay, the first three are because particularly financials have been asking for these sort of things. I agree with what Alan said, which is that be careful what you wish for, but I think we need to discuss this, and they need to make the case as to why they need those. The use case for Exploded is for automatic detection of mailing lists. Right. Remember, a key issue here is that we are looking to deal with DKIM replay. DKIM replay is when you see multiple copies of the same message, and nobody is admitting to the fact that they have exploded it. But if you do see the fact that they have exploded it, then you can say this is, and you are happy with the messages you're getting and your users are not complaining, then that is a mailing list, and you can basically set your threshold for how many copies of the messages you expect to see accordingly, and you don't have to clamp down on the mailing list. Yes, people say, oh, you can tell it's a mailing list because it has list headers. That's not necessarily true, and there are things like the sort of mailing lists that you set up inside of SMTP servers, which are not mailing lists, but people are producing distribution lists and so forth like that, and they don't have list hyphen headers at all. So it's a way of automatically detecting when you should not apply your really strict DKIM replay rules. That's a use case for it.
Just quickly on the do not things, they are only for the first hop, which leads me to think that maybe we could just make them a separate header, which could be defined.
They're for any hop. They're for any hop.
So, okay. But again, any hop could be used for any hop. Headers. Yeah. All right. My last two things were multiple algorithms and the choosing documents. So you're happy to skip those. Thank you. Am I still up here, or do I get to sit down?
No, I think you get to sit down now. We go back to chair slides.
I didn't get to read the chat the whole time.
Oh.
It's all brilliant.
So the one additional one that the chairs wanted to mention is we have adopted a DKIM 2 motivation draft, and it has gotten crickets on the list. I posted just the other day and said, how about that document? And Jim was kind enough to post some useful comments on the list, but I have not heard from others. I am perfectly comfortable to say, well, we want to leave this in the background because maybe it's going to be part of, our usage document, but please have a read over the document and decide what you think needs to be done with it. And if your feeling is, let's defer this until later, that can be your comment to the list too. So Barry, you had a thought?
It's Barry Liebe. Yeah, that was my thought, was defer any decision of what to do with this. This is guidance for now. And after the other stuff is done, we'll figure out whether this gets published or just stuffed away.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I wanted to float the idea with the working group.
Jim?
Jim Fenton. I disagree. I think this is an important document that defines the problem that we're trying to solve, problems that we're trying to solve here, defines things like backscatter and why that's important. It defines, all sorts of things. And I think we really need to have consensus about the problems that we're trying to solve before we solve them.
Barry, again, yeah, I think that's orthogonal to whether we publish this.
No, the question was not right now, do we publish it or not? The question is should the document be more like what Jim expressed, which is actually describing the problem statement for the group so that it can guide further discussion, or are we leaving it as a description of the design we came up with until later?
I don't see that those are different. Yes, what I'm saying is that this should guide our work.
Okay.
And if it needs to be tweaked to guide our work, we should do
We should do
that.
that. Okay.
But that the decision of the ultimate goal of whether this was eventually going to
Absolutely.
be published or become an AS or whatever is deferred until after.
Thanks. That helps. Bron, you had a comment.
I was just going to say I published a revision of this today as well, which changed some of the wording at the start just to more break it down to here are the problems we're trying to solve rather than here are the solutions that we have come up with. And I'm happy to spend some more time making it more of a just description of the problem space. So I would love feedback on you should take this out because it's too solution-y, or here's a better description of the problem. If anyone wants to give feedback on that, would love that. Thank you.
So homework assignment for everyone. Go read the document and see how much it angers you or excites you. I should note that the other thing that we kind of skipped over in our agenda was the review of what was talked about in Philadelphia, and which issues were open and which ones were closed. Some of that got folded into the discussion of the documents we had. But I'd appreciate Bron, Dave, others who attended, if you could give us a little summary on the list, that would be exceedingly helpful, I think, to folks, just to show where we are in issues. You did most of them. Go ahead.
For those remotely, I did what I thought was a pretty comprehensive write-up of what was there. But if people want to reply to specific bits on that on the list, I'd love that. It had fairly quiet reception. So
yep.
I assume you just all agreed with me and thought I covered everything perfectly, but please do reply to it, particularly if you disagree with anything.
Thanks. So any other business? We had a couple of things. Do you want to make mention? We'd have taken you at the back, Mike. You didn't have to walk all that way.
It's fine. In my capacity of general dog's body, I help gather speakers for FOSDEM, where it would be generally appreciated if someone were to come and speak about DKIM and DKIM2 and why DKIM2 even exists. What's been the problems with DKIM, that kind of thing. Not clear to me that anyone here ever comes to FOSDEM, but if you do, you're welcome at the mic.
When is FOSDEM?
FOSDEM is always the first Saturday, Sunday in February, and always in Brussels at one of the big universities there. Free and open source developer meeting. There's an email track which is called the Dev Room. Tends to be in one of the larger rooms now. People talk about developments in email, about exciting, is that the word? New email software and libraries and things. And in this case, hopefully a new standard.
Richard, do you want to go to Brussels?
It's possible. I've actually spoken at FOSDEM in the past.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so when I got out my Windows laptop in order to present my talk, everybody booed. So
you're already initiated then. You're welcome.
I would need to look at my calendar, but it's certainly a possibility, and I do know one or two things about DKIM.
You will be very welcome, very much appreciated.
Did you have? Oh, okay, good. That way you answered my question. Thank you. So as far as the interim goes, Mari and I were talking about January as a thought, because the only time that does not get into all sorts of holidays would be the very beginning of December, and I don't think we can pull that off. I can think happy thoughts about getting the minutes of this meeting out in the next week or two, but those would only be happy thoughts. And but we do want to do a decent summary of what was discussed here. So I think by the time all that's done, we're probably going to be looking at the beginning of January. People comfortable with that?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thumbs. We like thumbs. Thumbs. Excellent.
Nodding. I don't see any.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anything else from anybody in the room, remote or local? Richard, go ahead.
Yes, this is, I'll write this up for the list, but as I mentioned, I spent my time producing a submission server. I already had the SMT part of it, but I did the DKIM2 part of it. And I spent more time trying to get the nice DKIM2 line to come out with a line length of 78 and so forth than everything else put together. And one of the things that makes it complicated is the very complicated wrapping rules that we have for DKIM, for the DKIM signature headers. You're allowed to break the hashes any way you want because they are really, really long, and everything else you're supposed to break at white spaces. And I can see no reason for this whatsoever. It will be much easier if we removed all of the white space mentions and so forth, and just allowed people to wrap a DKIM2 or signature at any position that they wish to. People then glue it back together again and then pass it in the normal way. And it will reduce the amount of text we have for the ABNF very considerably and make it much more readable. So I'm going to throw that out there as something which people might like to think about as a significant simplification of the code base.
Open DKIM did it just fine. That was supposed to get a big laugh.
and there were a lot of nods and thumbs up in the room. Bron?
Yeah, having just done the same thing, I don't think there's anything in the header where white space is significant. So you could just strip all white space and it would be fine. I think that's the only way that this could work. But at that point, you need your canonicalization to do that, because the issue we have at the moment is that the canonicalization is multiple white spaces become a single white space, and that's what you sign. And so as soon as you start splitting where there is no white space now, you wind up breaking things. And the only hash that you're allowed to split in without breaking it at the moment is the signature base 64. If you split the body hash base 64, that will change the canonicalized version of it and break your signature. So we would either have to say all white space gets stripped from DKIM2 signatures as the canonicalization of them, or yeah, and Barry is saying yes, that we should make that the rule. And then you can split it wherever you like.
Wei, you had a comment before we close?
Yeah, real quick thing. There was a posting by Shintaro out on the list just earlier today that I thought was kind of interesting, which was basically DKIM2 will require some amount of, for forwarders, potentially to encode who the actual recipient of an actual bound through that forwarder is. And they were wondering if there is any standard for doing that type of encoding. And I guess the answer right now seems to be that it's up to local policy, but there may be some benefit in like creating something. I guess one suggestion could be to use, Microsoft's SRS format, or I guess the other thing would be to create some sort of definition so that parties that want to use something IETF defined could go use something like SRS. I guess they pointed out offline that it could be much simpler. And I was wondering if that might be something of interest to this group, since DKIM2 says so much about how bounce handling should work.
Alan has a quick comment.
So I think we're already defining that thing. It's called the DKIM2 signature, which contains the mail from. So if you're forwarding a DKIM2 message, you signed it with the mail from that you're sending, but the signature that you received had the mail from that you were probably using. Like a forwarder today doesn't have to use a new mail from. They can just use the existing one. you can get the same value from the previous DKIM2 signature.
I'm standing up here to object to your theory here. The previous mail from is going to be in a different domain that doesn't align to your domain when you're signing, so you can't do it. You need to give a mail from that's in your domain.
Yes,
and this.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like that's what I'm saying is you use a mail from in your domain, but the signature prior to yours has the original mail from. You don't need to encode it in your mail from necessarily to be able to rederive it. You can prove that that signature is the one that you saw because your signature still passes in the bounce. And so you can use that as a tamper-proof mechanism to get it back to you. Like we also specified a nonce. So if you wanted to run a database, go nuts.
This strikes me as a discussion that might take longer than negative 32 seconds.
The thing here is if you are a naive forwarder that wants to be able to send the bounces back, you need some way of knowing that. And you can either extract it from the headers or you can encode it with SRS or you can use nonce, whatever. You can use whatever you like, but maybe we should define a way that says if you're a naive forwarder, this might be a good one.
With that, we are but barely a minute over time. This was a very dense discussion. Murray and I will try and do our best to summarize and maybe use Ecker's see what ChatGPT will do with it. We will get that to the list, get some discussions going in separate threads, and try to arrange an interim real soon now. Thank you all. Clapping. There's been a lot of clapping at this IETF. Man. That must be it. It's the Canadians. That was productive. It was. What's that?